Chapter 1. The Arrest of Arsène Lupin. What a strange voyage! And it had begun so well. For my part, I have never made another that announced itself under more favorable circumstances. The Provence was a swift, comfortable ocean liner, commanded by the most affable of men. On board, the finest of society had gathered. Friendships were forming, plans were being made. We had the delicious impression of being isolated from the world, left to ourselves, as if on some unknown island, compelled, therefore, to draw closer to one another. And closer we drew. Have you ever thought about what is so singular and unexpected in this gathering of people who, just the day before, did not know one another, and who, for a few days, between the infinite sky and the immense sea, will share the most intimate of lives, defying together the fury of the ocean, the terrifying assault of the waves, the insidious calm of the sleeping water? At its heart, it is like living a tragic summary of life itself, with its storms and its splendors, its monotony and its variety. And therein, perhaps, lies the reason we savor with such feverish intensity this brief voyage, whose end we already glimpse just as it is beginning. In recent years, however, something had been singularly intensifying the emotions of the crossing. The little floating island continued to depend on that world from which we believed ourselves free. A bond remained, loosening itself little by little in the middle of the ocean, and, little by little, in the middle of the ocean, tying itself back again. The wireless telegraph. Calls from another universe, from which we would receive news in the most mysterious way imaginable. The imagination could no longer rely on the image of metallic wires through which the invisible message glides. The mystery was even more unfathomable, and more poetic. And it is to the wings of the wind that we are compelled to turn to explain this new miracle. In the first hours, we felt followed, escorted, even preceded by that distant voice which, from time to time, whispered to one of us a few words from solid ground. 2 friends spoke to me. 10 others, 20, sent us all, across space, their sad or smiling farewells. Well then, on the second day, 500 miles from the French coast, during a stormy afternoon, the telegraph transmitted a message to us. Its content was as follows. Arsène Lupin on board. First class. Blonde. Wound on right forearm. Traveling alone. Using the surname R. At that very instant, a violent bolt of lightning thundered across the dark sky. The electrical impulses were interrupted. The rest of the message never arrived. Of the surname behind which Arsène Lupin was hiding, we only learned the initial. Under any other circumstances, I have no doubt the secret would have been scrupulously kept by the telegraphists, as well as by the ship's purser and the captain. There are facts, however, that seem to break through even the most rigorous discretion. That same day, without anyone understanding how, the thing had spread. Everyone knew. Arsène Lupin was slipping among us. Arsène Lupin among us. The elusive scoundrel whose exploits the newspapers had been reporting for months. The enigmatic figure with whom old Ganimard, our finest detective, had engaged in a duel to the death, whose twists and turns had unfolded in such a colorful fashion. Arsène Lupin, the eccentric gentleman who operates only in castles and drawing-rooms, and who, one night, after breaking into Baron Schauman's residence, had departed empty-handed and left his calling card, taking his leave with elegance. Arsène Lupin, gentleman burglar, will return when the furniture is genuine. Arsène Lupin, the man of 1,000 disguises. By turns a chauffeur, a tenor, a bookmaker, a young man of good family, an adolescent, an old man, a Marseille sales representative, a Russian doctor, a Spanish bullfighter. Simply imagine this. Arsène Lupin moving freely within the relatively confined setting of an ocean liner. In the small corner of first class where we had just been gathered, in that dining room, that lounge, that smoking room. Arsène Lupin might be that gentleman over there, or that one, my table neighbor, my cabin companion. And this is going to last 5 times 24 hours. Miss Nellie Underdown exclaimed the following day. It is an intolerable situation. I only hope they catch him. And, turning to me, you, who have already won the captain's favor, would you know anything, Mr. D'Andracy? How I wished I knew something to please Miss Nellie. She was one of those magnificent creatures who, wherever they are, immediately occupy center stage. Beautiful and wealthy, they dazzle. They move with a retinue of devoted admirers, of enthusiasts. Raised in Paris by her French mother, she was on her way to meet her father, the very wealthy Underdown, of Chicago. A friend of hers, Lady Jerland, accompanied her. From the very first moment, I had put myself forward as a suitor. Yet, in the swift intimacy of the voyage, her charm soon unsettled me. And when her large dark eyes met mine, I felt far too dazed for a simple flirtation. Even so, it was with a certain goodwill that she received my attentions. She consented to laugh at my jokes, and took an interest in my stories. A vague sympathy seemed to return the interest I devoted to her. Only one rival perhaps gave me unease, a rather handsome young man, whose brooding temperament she seemed to prefer over my more outgoing Parisian manner. As it happened, he was among the group of admirers surrounding Miss Nellie when she questioned me. We were on deck, settled into comfortable rocking chairs. The previous day's storm had cleared the sky. A delicious moment of the afternoon. I know nothing precise, I replied. But would you consider it possible for us to conduct an independent investigation, as old Ganimard himself, Arsène Lupin's personal enemy, might do? Oh, that would be going too far. In what sense? Is the problem really so complicated? Enormously so. Perhaps because one forgets the elements at our disposal for solving it. And what elements are those? First, Lupin is passing himself off as Mr. R, a rather vague description. Second, he is traveling alone. If such a detail is enough for you. Third, he is blonde. And so, all we need to do is consult the passenger list and proceed by elimination. I had that list in my pocket. I took it out and went through it slowly. I note at once that the passengers whose initial draws our attention are limited to 13. Only 13? In first class, yes. Of those 13 gentlemen whose surname begins with R, as you can verify, 9 are accompanied by wives, children, or servants. That leaves 4 unaccompanied individuals. The Marquis de Raverdan, Embassy Secretary, Miss Nellie interjected. I know him. Major Rawson. That is my uncle, someone said. Mr. Revolta. Present, exclaimed someone among us, an Italian whose face disappeared beneath a magnificent black beard. Miss Nellie burst out laughing. That gentleman is not exactly blonde. Therefore, I resumed, we are compelled to conclude that the guilty party is the last name on the list. Which is Mr. Rosaine. Does anyone know Mr. Rosaine? Silence. Miss Nellie, however, addressing the brooding young man whose constant presence at her side tormented me, said, Well then, Mr. Rosaine, why do you not react? All eyes turned to him. He was blonde. Deep down, I confess, I felt a small jolt, and the uncomfortable silence that fell over us suggested the others present were feeling that same kind of breathlessness, which, it must be said, was absurd. After all, nothing in the gentleman's manner justified any suspicion against him. "Why do I not react?" he repeated. "Simply because, given my name, my status as a solo traveler, and the color of my hair, I have already conducted a similar interrogation and arrived at the same conclusion. Therefore, I am in favor of having myself arrested." As he said those words, a strange expression came over him. His lips, thin as two straight lines, grew even thinner and paled. Veins of blood streaked his eyes. He was joking, no doubt. Even so, his expression and his bearing made an impression on us. Candidly, Miss Nelly asked, "And the wound?" "Ah, yes," he said. "The wound is missing." With a nervous gesture, he rolled up his sleeve and showed his arm. A sudden thought struck me. My eyes crossed Miss Nelly's. He had shown his left arm. I swear, just as I was about to make that observation explicitly, an incident distracted our attention. Lady Jerland, Miss Nelly's friend, arrived in a breathless rush. She was completely distraught. We gathered around her, and only with great effort did she manage to stammer. "My jewels, my pearls. They have taken everything." No, they had not taken everything, as we soon discovered. Something far more curious had occurred. They had chosen. From the diamond star, from the ruby cabochon pendant, from the necklaces and bracelets, they had removed not the largest stones, but the most delicate and precious ones. Those of the greatest value, and the smallest size. The settings lay there, on the table. I could see them, we all could, stripped of their jewels, like flowers from which someone had torn away the beautiful glittering colored petals. To carry out the work, it had been necessary, during the hour in which Lady Jerland was taking tea, in broad daylight and in a busy corridor, to force the cabin door, find a small purse deliberately hidden at the bottom of a hat box, open it, and choose. A cry escaped from every mouth at once. Once the news of the theft had spread, the opinion of the passengers was unanimous. It was Arsène Lupin. And indeed, that was manifestly his method. Complicated, mysterious, inconceivable, and yet perfectly logical. For while it would have been difficult to conceal the bulky burden that the full collection of jewels would have formed, how much less trouble with small individual pieces. Pearls, emeralds, sapphires. At dinner time, the following occurred. The two seats to the right and left of Rosaine remained empty. That evening, we learned he had been summoned by the captain. His arrest, which no one questioned any longer, came as a genuine relief. We could breathe again. That night, we amused ourselves with light-hearted games. We danced. Miss Nelly, in particular, displayed a sparkling joy, making me see that, if she had initially appreciated Rosaine's courtship, she no longer gave it a thought. Her Grace finished conquering me entirely. Around midnight, beneath the tranquil brightness of the moonlight, I declared myself with an emotion that did not seem to displease her. The following day, however, to everyone's astonishment, we learned that, the accusations against him having proven unfounded, Rosaine was free. The son of a prominent merchant from Bordeaux, his documents were in perfect order. Furthermore, no trace of a wound was found on either of his arms. Documents, birth certificates, cried Rosaine's enemies. Arsène Lupin will provide as many as anyone wishes. As for the wound, either he never had one, or he erased it. It was objected that, at the moment of the theft, Rosaine, this had been proven, was walking on deck. To which they replied, "Since when does a man of Arsène Lupin's caliber need to be present at the moment of the robbery?" Yet, rising above all other considerations, There was one point that not even the most skeptical could refute. Who, besides Rosaine, travelled alone, was blonde, and had a surname beginning with R? At whom did the telegram point, if not at Rosaine? When, a few minutes before lunch, he came boldly toward our group, Miss Nelly and Lady Jerland rose and kept their distance. It was fear, pure and simple. An hour later, a handwritten circular was passing from hand to hand among the ship's officers, sailors, and passengers of every class. Mr. Louis Rosaine was offering a sum of 10,000 francs to whoever unmasked Arsène Lupin, or discovered who was in possession of the stolen gems. If no one comes to help me against this scoundrel, Rosaine declared to the captain, I will settle the matter myself. Rosaine against Arsène Lupin. Or, according to the jest making the rounds, Arsène Lupin against Arsène Lupin himself. A struggle that was not without its interest. It lasted 2 days. Rosaine was seen everywhere, mingling with the crew, questioning, prying. His shadow was spotted at night, lurking. The captain, for his part, devoted himself to the limit of his energies. From top to bottom, in every corner, the Provence was searched. Every cabin, without exception, was inspected. We will end up finding something, don't you think? Miss Nelly pressed. Not even by witchcraft can he make diamonds and pearls invisible. Yes, he can, I replied. Otherwise, they would need to search the crowns of our hats, the linings of our coats, and everything we carry with us. I showed her my Kodak, a 9x12 camera with which I never tired of photographing her in the most varied poses. All of Lady Jerland's precious stones would fit inside a camera no larger than this one, wouldn't they? All one needs to do is pretend to take a few photographs, and pull off the trick. But I have heard it said that there is no thief who does not leave some trace behind. There is one. Arsène Lupin. Why? Because he thinks not only of the theft he is committing, but of every circumstance that might give him away. You seemed more confident at the beginning, but then I saw him at work. So, in your view, in my view, we are wasting our time. Indeed, the investigations yielded no results. Or at least, the results they did yield bore no relation to the collective effort. The captain's wristwatch was stolen. Furious, he redoubled his energy and tightened surveillance over Rosaine. The following day, in a delightful twist of irony, the watch was found among the first officer's spare shirt collars. All of this had the air of something miraculous. It bore the humorous stamp of Arsène Lupin. A thief, certainly, but no less of a dilettante for that. He worked out of taste and vocation, but also for his own amusement. He seemed like a playwright, entertaining himself with the play he himself had written, and, backstage, laughing uproariously at the jokes and situations he had devised. So then, what a story, isn't it? We have an entire ship in a panic, a thief no one can see, and a man named Rosaine who could be everything, or nothing at all. I keep thinking about it. And you? Do you think Rosaine really is Arsène Lupin? Or could the real thief be right there, smiling at everyone, and no one the wiser? Stay with me, because in the next chapter things are going to start falling into place. And when they do, you will be glad you paid close attention to the details today. Rest a little, take a deep breath, and when you are ready, we will continue together. He was decidedly an artist in his own way, and when I observed Rosaine, brooding and relentless, speculating on the double role of that curious character, I found myself unable to speak of him without a certain admiration. Now, on the third to last night, the officer on duty heard moaning in the darkest corner of the deck. He approached. There lay a man, his head wrapped in a thick grey scarf, his wrists bound with a thin cord. They untied him. They helped him to his feet. They tended to him. That man was Rosaine. It was Rosaine, attacked during one of his investigations, struck down and robbed. A calling card, pinned to his clothing, bore the words, "Arsène Lupin gratefully accepts the 10,000 francs from Mr. Rosaine." In truth, the stolen wallet contained 20,000 franc notes. The unfortunate man was naturally accused of having staged the attack against himself. Yet, besides the fact that it was impossible to tie oneself up in such a manner, it was established that the handwriting on the card differed radically from Rosaine's, resembling instead, to the point of being indistinguishable, that of Arsène Lupin, as reproduced in an old newspaper found on board. Rosaine was therefore no longer Arsène Lupin. Rosaine was Rosaine, son of a merchant from Bordeaux. And the presence of Arsène Lupin returned to haunt the ship, with a great show of force. Terror took hold. We no longer dared remain alone in our cabins, let alone venture into deserted places. Cautiously, we gathered among those we trusted. Yet even so, an instinctive distrust crept between the closest of friends. For the threat did not come from any single individual, which would have made it less dangerous. Arsène Lupin was now everyone. Our overexcited imaginations attributed to him a miraculous and boundless power. We supposed him capable of assuming the most unexpected disguises, of being at one moment the respectable Major Rawson, at another the noble Marquis de Raverdan, or even this or that person known to all, with a wife, children, and servants. The first dispatches transmitted through the air brought no news. Or at least the captain shared nothing with us, in a silence that was far from reassuring. The last day, therefore, seemed endless. We lived in anguished anticipation of tragedy. This time, it would no longer be a theft, no longer a simple assault. It would be a crime. It would be murder. It seemed impossible that Arsène Lupin would content himself with those two insignificant halls. Absolute master of the ship, with the authorities reduced to helplessness, he had only to wish it. Everything was permitted to him. He held sway over our possessions, and our lives. Delightful hours for me, I confess, for I had won Miss Nelly's trust. Uneasy by nature, and shaken by so many incidents, she had spontaneously sought my protection. A sense of security that I took joy in offering her. Deep down, I blessed Arsène Lupin. Was it not he who was bringing us together? Was it not thanks to him that I had the right to give myself over to the most beautiful of dreams? Dreams of love, and dreams less fanciful than they might seem. The d'Andracy family is of distinguished lineage, though their coat of arms has grown somewhat tarnished, and it seems to me not unworthy of a gentleman to consider restoring its lost luster. These dreams, I sensed, did not offend Nelly. Her smiling eyes gave me leave to nurture them. The softness of her voice told me to hold on to hope. Leaning on the railing, we remained side by side until the very last moment, as the outline of the American coastline stretched before us. The investigations had been suspended. It was time to wait. From first class to the steerage section, where the immigrants were crowded together, everyone awaited the supreme moment. When, at last, the unsolvable mystery would be resolved. Who was Arsène Lupin? Under what name, what mask, was the famous Arsène Lupin hiding? And that supreme moment arrived. Even if I lived 100 years, I would never forget the smallest detail. "How pale you are, Miss Nelly," I said to my companion, who leaned on my arm, trembling all over. "And you," she replied. "How changed you look. Well, think about it. It is an electrifying moment, and I consider it a privilege to be living it at your side, Miss Nellie." Breathless and nervous, she was not listening. The gangway came down. Yet, before we were permitted to cross it, several people came on board. Customs agents, uniformed men, messengers. Miss Nellie murmured. If they were to conclude that Arsène Lupin had escaped during the crossing, I would not be the least bit surprised. Or perhaps he preferred death to dishonor, and threw himself into the Atlantic rather than be arrested. "Do not laugh," she replied, displeased. A sudden shiver ran through me, and as she questioned me, I explained slowly. "Do you see that little old man standing at the far end of the gangway? The one with the umbrella and the olive-green frock coat? That is Ganimard." "Ganimard?" "Yes, the celebrated detective. The one who swore to arrest Arsène Lupin with his own hands." "Ah, now I understand why we had no news from this side of the ocean. Ganimard was here all along. He prefers to handle his affairs personally. Then Arsène Lupin will finally be caught. Who knows? Ganimard seems to have only ever seen him in disguise. Unless he knows the surname he adopted." "Ah," she exclaimed, with a slightly cruel feminine curiosity. "How I would love to witness his arrest. A little patience. Arsène Lupin has certainly already noticed the presence of his enemy. He will come out among the last, when the old man's eyes are tired." The disembarkation began. Leaning on his umbrella, feigning indifference, Ganimard seemed to pay little attention to the crowd squeezing between the two railings. I noticed that a ship's officer, positioned behind him, whispered information to him from time to time. The Marquis de Raverdan passed, then Major Rawson, then the Italian Revolter, and others, many others. I spotted Rosaine, drawing near. Poor Rosaine. He did not seem to have recovered from his misfortunes. "In the end, perhaps it really is him," suggested Miss Nellie. "What do you think?" "I think it would be of great interest to capture Ganimard and Rosaine in the same photograph. Please use my camera. I am rather encumbered." I handed her the camera, but too late for her to take the shot. Rosaine was passing. The officer leaned toward Ganimard's ear. Ganimard gave a slight shrug of his shoulders, and Rosaine passed through. But then, "My God, who was Arsène Lupin?" "Yes," she said aloud. "Who is it?" Only about 20 passengers remained. She studied them one by one, vaguely afraid that he might not be among them. I urged her on. "We cannot wait any longer." She moved forward. I followed. Yet, we had not taken 10 steps when Ganimard blocked our path. "Very well, what is this?" I said. "One moment, sir. Such haste. I am accompanying the young lady." "One moment," he repeated, in an imperious voice. After examining me closely, he asked, eyes fixed on mine, "Arsène Lupin, correct?" I burst out laughing. "No. Bernard d'Andracy," modestly. "Bernard d'Andracy died 3 years ago in Macedonia. If Bernard d'Andracy were dead, I would no longer belong to this world. And that is not the case. Here are my papers. They are his. How you obtained them is what I shall have the pleasure of explaining. You are mad. Arsène Lupin boarded under a surname beginning with R. Yes, one more trick of yours. A false trail you set for us. Ah, you are quite a phenomenon, my friend. But this time, the tide has turned. Come now, Lupin, be a gracious loser." I hesitated for a second. He seized my right forearm with a sharp grip. I cried out in pain. He had found the wound, still barely healed, that the telegram had described. At last, the moment called for resignation. I turned to Miss Nellie. She was listening, pale as ash, unsteady on her feet. Her gaze met mine, then dropped instantly to the kodak I had placed in her hands. The abrupt way she reacted gave me the impression, the certainty even, that she had understood in a flash. Yes, it was there. Between the narrow walls of the black case, in the body of that small object, which I had taken the precaution of placing in her hands before Ganimard gave the order for my arrest, it was there, indeed, that the 20,000 francs from Rosaine were resting, along with Lady Jerland's pearls and diamonds. Ah! I swear. In that solemn moment, as Ganimard and 2 of his men closed in around me, everything became indifferent to me. My arrest, the hostility of those around me, everything, except one thing. The decision Miss Nellie would make regarding what I had entrusted to her. That they held material and decisive proof against me, that mattered little. But that proof, would Miss Nellie hand it over? Would I be betrayed by her? Destroyed by her? Would she act as an unforgiving enemy, or as a woman who remembers, whose contempt is softened by a drop of indulgence, of involuntary sympathy? She passed before me. I greeted her discreetly, without a word. Mingled among the other passengers, she made her way toward the gangway, my kodak in her hands. In public, I thought, surely she would not dare. It would be within an hour, within a moment, that she would hand it over. Yet, upon reaching the middle of the gangway, feigning an accident, she let it fall into the water, between the wall of the dock and the side of the ship. Then I watched as she walked away. Her graceful silhouette disappeared into the crowd, reappeared, and vanished. It was over. Over forever. For one still moment, sad, and yet filled with a tender sweetness. I sighed, to Ganimard's great astonishment. Sometimes I am sorry I am not an honest man. It was in this way that, during a winter's night, Arsène Lupin told me the story of his arrest. A series of incidents, which one day I shall commit to paper, had drawn our bonds closer. Bonds of friendship, may I say? Yes. I venture to suppose that Arsène Lupin honors me with a certain friendship. And it is that friendship which brings him to appear without warning at my home, carrying into the silence of my study his youthful joy, the spark of an incandescent life, the good humor of a man for whom fate has nothing but favors and smiles. His portrait. How to paint it? I have seen Arsène Lupin 20 times, and each time it was a different creature who appeared before me. Or rather, the same creature, of whom 20 mirrors would have returned 20 equally distorted images. Each with its singular eyes, its unmistakable silhouette, its particular gestures, its profile, its character. Myself, he confided to me, I no longer know who I am. I no longer recognize myself in the mirror. A jest, I know, and a paradox. But the truth for anyone who encounters him and is unaware of his infinite resources, his patience, his art of disguise, his prodigious gift for altering even the proportions of his face, shifting the balance of its features. Why, he continues, should I have a fixed appearance? Why not avoid the danger of a personality that is always the same? My deeds are enough to identify me. And he adds, with a touch of pride, so much the better if they are never able to say with absolute certainty, this is Arsène Lupin. The essential thing is that they say, without fear of error, Arsène Lupin did this. It is some of these deeds, these adventures, that I endeavor to reconstruct from the confidences with which he has so generously graced me, during certain winter nights, in the silence of my study. And so, here we are at the end of this first story. What a character, isn't he? A man who steals with elegance, who vanishes like smoke, who looks out at the world with a smile on his lips and a secret in his pocket. And the most curious thing of all is that in the end, he made me feel something close to sympathy for him. Did you feel that too? Miss Nellie dropped the camera into the river. She knew. And she chose not to hand him over. I wonder why she did that. These are the questions that keep whispering through the night long after the story ends. And in the next tale, Arsène Lupin will appear again, different, unpredictable, as always. Thank you for being here with me until now. You are wonderful company for these quiet reading nights. Rest well, and when the time comes, we will continue on together.